Hi, and welcome. This is Martha Wright, and this is my channel, I Lit a Candle Presentations for the XJW community. This is my number 7 YouTube and my number 6 on Jehovah's Witnesses in mental health. And I had said last time I wanted to talk a little bit about the little things that you can do. And getting enough sleep is very, very important. In fact, I believe it's the foundation of our mental health and stability. When I deal with a new person, client that comes in, I like to find out first whatever it is that they're concerned about, but I really pay attention as far as their sleep and all these things, especially in the beginning. Because once people's normal sleeping patterns, or what should be normal, are established, a lot of things will begin to clear up. Now, there was a doctor in the mid-20th century, Dr. Beeler, and he wrote a book, Food is Your Best Medicine. Now, I'm not going to talk about food or diet. What Dr. Beeler did was to put people to bed and put them to sleep for weeks, even days at least, days, weeks, months. And one man I remember for a year, his body had been really destroyed by cortisone, and the doctors had given up on him, and Dr. Beeler took him on, and his health was completely restored, but it was a year in bed. And of course they were a little. Now, I read about another study when I was going to one school where we studied medical things. And it was about a experimental group of medical people who were taking people and putting them to sleep for a month. And they found that all their allergies, these were people with many allergies, they all cleared up. And I was particularly intrigued by this because my poor mother had like 70 tested for food allergies as well as many other allergies. She never got to do that, and she certainly was a person that didn't get a lot of sleep and pushed herself. So this is really something to consider, and what it really has to do with a lot of is histamine and antihistamine levels, and this can have a profound effect on people. You only make antihistamines when you're sleeping, so this is a good reason why. So before anybody would attempt to do something like this is not, these people were under a team of medical supervisors, so it's not really something you should try to do, especially for such a prolonged time. But getting to sleep, getting to bed earlier, and making a better pattern and better habit of that would certainly help, really, really help a lot of people. And that's why I'm just like making this entire YouTube on this. It's really interesting how the society pushed people so much, and that's one why I'm bringing this up. In fact, we'll go over quite a bit about this. When they knew, they were always emphasizing the Israelites and God's laws for the Israelites. Well, we know that they had to keep a Sabbath, and in fact, if they didn't keep it, it was pretty serious. And I can just imagine God saying, they complain all the time about everything, and I think if they took one day off a week, it would resolve a lot of these issues. And if they don't keep it, I'm going to kill them. So, humor aside, the fact is, it really does a person good to just let go of responsibilities, and especially laborious, repetitious things that day after day we have to do. Just give it a day off once a week. Wayne Dyer is a very famous self-help guru, and he was asked one time how do you get so much done? And he said, because I take one day off a week. And in all seriousness, he went on about the whole issue. And the fact is, we really do need to recharge ourselves, and this is a great way to do it. And we do find we can get more done. So one of the reasons why I bring this up, as we know, Jehovah's Witnesses have been pretty pushed on their schedules, keeping all those meetings, family study, going out in service, anybody who has Bible studies, and those who were in responsible positions as servants of one type, they had a lot, and they probably resented. It always seemed to me they very much resented being called upon for anything special, and you can understand, because that wasn't the way they were making a living. They had to go out and make a living too. And the thing is, you remember all those wonderful little skits and dramas and things, how the father came home, he was exhausted, didn't really want to go out to the meetings, and there were the kids, and aren't we going to the meeting, and all this sort of thing. And then the poor pioneer mother was making dinner after being out in the service all day, and she was exhausted, but she had to get all ready for the meetings and rush out the door. And then everybody went, and everybody was happy they had gone to the meetings. Well, this really only goes so far, because it's one thing if it's a one meeting, but when this is a continuous guilt trip and routine, week after week, year after year, you end up with some rebels on your hand. This guilt tripping eventually became so obvious to many people, though they couldn't say it. It drove people away. Another thing, talk about allergies and sleep and exhaustion. I don't know if you were or are in one of those kingdom halls where a lot of the women are not going to the meetings because they say they have allergies to the carpet or the paint or whatever it is. So they have to have the meetings piped into them on the phone. I've always thought that was a lot of nonsense. It's just, they just don't want to go, basically. So people can't be honest, and they also have allergies, right? Now, the whole thing about the meetings, they were somewhat instructional, but really they were extremely repetitious, and everything could have been handled quite differently, and especially for children. I always felt that it was ludicrous to expect children to sit straight upright and supposedly listen to somebody talking when they couldn't even understand it. In fact, I want to go into that a lot more later in another YouTube. Now, if a person was trying to get through a course and it had a purpose and it was really going somewhere, then going to every instructional session would be very important. They would have to have workbooks and be tested and so forth. But really, do we need to drive all the way to big assemblies and hear about tight pants and other things like that? I don't think so. I can tell you in later years, I was in for 42 hard years, starting when I was about 10. And in the last few years, I would just go to Yosemite or somewhere like that and try to pick up the Sunday meeting afternoon at the end to see if they really had anything new to say. Because, like I said, a lot of it was very just repetitious and kind of a nagging routine or all this sort of thing. Now, when I lived in Canada, in Oshawa, that was a little General Motors town, there was a circuit overseer who announced at the podium that many people were complaining that they weren't sleeping well. And his answer was, if they were going to the meetings, out in service, and all this, that was what they needed to do. And he said, that their conscience was being bothered, basically. Yeah, they had a bad conscience. And if they just did those things, they'd be fine. So, if they were really shepherds, I think they would have been, or he would have been much more concerned. And of course, it wasn't just him, it's an attitude that permeates the organization. And talk about shepherds, just think of Psalms 23. I don't know if I ever heard it expressed at the Kingdom Hall, but it talks about the poor little sheep, their oil, this, special oil being poured over their heads and so forth, being anointed with oil. Well, it just means you put oil on. The thing is, oil is a healing thing, and what they were doing was, after the sheep had been nicked and cut and scratched, going around in the dirt and getting cut up on their little faces, the shepherd would go to some of them and put this healing oil on them. So these shepherds could be so kind to a little sheep, but what about the people? This may seem kind of airy-fairy and that, but what is the way we can calculate the damage that was done to husbands and wives, marriages, families, by the insistence of this high-performance schedule that really, where did it go? A lot of damage. Now, I know everybody likes stories. I do too. And I'm going to share a couple with you. I remember very clearly when my now ex-husband, I was married for 31 years, and it wasn't easy. My ex-husband, when we were getting ready one Sunday morning to go to the meeting, we had 3 kids, 2 babies, and he just stopped in his tracks and he ripped off his tie, he ripped off his suit, and he said, "I'm not doing this anymore." Well, I didn't make a fuss or argue with him. That's a long story too. I had hoped he would change his mind. I just carried on. At that time, we'd been married about 9 years, and I had a baby and a close to 2-year-old and an older one, about 6 or 7. And anybody who's had a family, and we know a lot of these governing body people and people that decide all the rules, they haven't had kids. But you know how crazy making it is before the meetings with feeding everybody, bathing everybody, and getting everybody changed, especially little kids, yourself and the kids, and get out the door and to the meetings on time. It just gets to be a lot. Another time, it really breaks my heart to remember when my now ex-husband said, he stopped and he was very sad and very serious, and he said, Jesus said that his load was light. He said, something is wrong. Something is wrong. Yes, there was something wrong. I knew what he meant, and I really agreed. But, of course, I was one to push myself, and it had been years of suffering, really, for me. I had so many issues, and I didn't have as good a health even as my husband, and yet I did persist. But I was pretty used to suffering. I had a brutal childhood, and the organization and what we called the truth meant a great deal to me. So I persisted. There I was, taking 3 little kids to the meetings and out in service. In fact, I had to strap the baby on the front and push the stroller. In Canada, in fact, it was literally 40 below, literally, and even below. Well, I could go on and on about this, but the gist of it is that in the end, Jehovah's Witnesses, many develop a very strange and peculiar relationship with time management and allowing themselves sleep and rest. In fact, I'm sure it affects their sleep, especially the self-talk that's going on. Now, I'm not going to go into the self-talk now. I want to devote a whole YouTube to that. But we have been a people that has not been allowed to rest and sleep, and it really, of course, has affected some people more than others. As I said, there are some people who maybe feel that they don't need much sleep, and there are people I knew some very, very active witnesses, and I stayed at their house, and I know they're up till midnight, and then they're up at 4 in the morning. Well, not everybody can do that. You know, some people have thyroid problems, and they're just very hyperthyroid. So I knew another family years later, very much the same, up arguing, fighting till midnight, and then up again at 4 in the morning, fighting and arguing. Not everybody can or wants to live like that. But the point is, lack of sleep can make people very busy. It's just part of the pattern with some people, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're getting a lot done. We do have our natural circadian rhythms that our body is in tune with, and really, don't you think we should respect that, since that's the way God made us? Well, anyway, people are always trying to justify themselves and explain away and defend themselves. I've seen this in the organization, and people might stop and think about that, because this carries over especially into our ability to sleep at night and just simply to rest. I could write a treatise on the subject. I had a girl come to me one time who had stabbed her boyfriend quite a bit. And then she told me how somebody had told her she needed to do all this stuff, and she didn't sleep for a week. She literally didn't sleep for a week. And then, lo and behold, she stabs her boyfriend. Well, she went on to the medical doctors, and I'm sure they probably put her on a lot of drugs and all this. And sometimes if we go through an experience, very traumatic experience, maybe being disfellowshipped or something else like that, we may have a period of time like that, and it takes a while to get things straightened out and really get back into a good sleep pattern. Now, some people spend a lot of money going to a sleep clinic, and sometimes that is necessary, but what I've seen for the most part, I don't really like some of the things that they tell people to do, because for one thing, I know some people very well, and they were told to just stay up till they're basically exhausted. They don't go to sleep right away at a certain time, 11 o'clock or whatever. That the next night they're supposed to stay up another hour and another hour. And this person I saw just got more and more exhausted, and she wasn't supposed to take naps. And this is utter nonsense to me, especially if you miss sleep. Then by all means, if you need to take a nap in the day, that's certainly the right and good thing to do. Some people say they can't take naps. Well, something needs to be done. Certainly, maybe getting to bed a little earlier. Some people really will never get a good night's sleep unless they go to bed pretty early. And that's just certain constitutional types. Now, another thing is habits. Habits are hard to break, but it takes about 3 weeks if you're really intent, and what you need to do is put another habit in its place. So it's really good for people who have been in the organization, and especially on coming out, there's certainly a lot of tumult at times, and sadness and depression and confusion and all this, is give it to rest. And remember the things I said about getting the REM therapy treatment, or what they call rapid eye movement therapy, because that's really just mimicking sleep. You're going to go through little dreaming things with that. And that is actually, too, another thing to bring up here is dreams are the way we stay asleep. And that's why God made us. And I know there's been a lot said about dreaming, books written on it and so forth. But I believe dreams are charades. And it's also where your workaday, daytime mind, your practical mind, and all the things that happen that you don't have time to really ponder over during the day, you meet your emotional, your spiritual body at night, and you sort things out that way. And also memories and so forth are filed away. If a person was in an accident where they lose consciousness, they won't remember that day after, if they don't dream, if they don't have a sleep and dream on that time. So we know a little bit why we dream, but it's very important. And they've also linked if people that don't dream also don't have very good memories. So encourage dreaming. If you know of different things you can do, it will help you to get your brain working better. Now, as witnesses, we may have given a lot of attention to the Bible about prophetic dreams. And I'm not saying people can't have them, but they're certainly rare compared to every day we need to dream, we need to sleep. And it's just a normal process. And dreams can be kind of weird and maybe very upsetting, but that's because the emotional side of things hasn't been worked through. It hasn't been worked out. And when you get enough sleep and enough dreaming, sometimes there will be more emotional progress on something that in your life. Another thing, if people are overstimulated with food or just too much talking, that can really make them very restless at night. So another thing is too, in the past, there weren't so many issues about sleep as far as lights, TV, camera, music, radios, whatever. People are always texting and always wanting to see what's on their phone next. Keeping in suspense like that is very, it can just destabilize you as far as your ability to rest. So it's really very important even at times to take a nap, because it will actually help you sleep better at night and slow down that agitation that can build up in the day. Now, I paid a lot of attention in my life to sleep issues because I had quite a few. I did have a lot of fillings, and like I said, mercury can actually be quite a problem too. So there you can always look into heavy metal detox. I recommend the homeopathic kind, not worrying about some of those elaborate things that they're doing. Now, I lived in, as I said, Oshawa in Canada, and it was a General Motors town, and my word, everybody was on swing shifts, night shifts, day shifts, and it would alternate, which is actually harder on people than just being on one shift. And all I can say is there are books written on this, and if you can get out of that kind of lifestyle, it's good. But if you can't, then everybody in the house needs to respect whoever's having to do that work. They need to respect that person's sleep and rest, and especially if it's the breadwinner of a house. So you think it would go without saying, but I know from experience that these poor people having to do this is real. They really need your support, and the same with new mothers or with newborns. I've seen cases where these poor mothers were up for 3 months straight and couldn't get any sleep. And I know I had 2 kids 2 years apart, and I'll tell you, I hardly slept for 3 years at all, and I don't think I've ever completely recovered from it. So another thing is to think about the fact that sleep deprivation, sleep deficiency, or being deprived of sleep has been a tactic of governments, the organizations, whether it's CIA or whoever these people are, the Russians or whoever, Scientologists. They have used this, cults have used this, and I really think that there is something going on in the organization with this too, because you think of all the pedophilia that I had no idea for many years that anything of this was going on. And I've been out about 20 years, so anyway, I'll talk more about that another time. But when you think what is the chances of the coincidence, all this pedophilia, and then the exhaustion that people were pushed into with this repetitious, meaningless, really, scheduling of meetings and all these demands affect people even if they had a chance to sleep, because they're always feeling so guilty about they just couldn't cover all the bases, So it's really something to think about. And the fact, what I'm really saying now is, hopefully you can just let go of that alligator for a while and really enjoy getting some of the weight off your shoulders. I know when I was disfellowshipped, it was tragic and horrible, and it was also what I felt was just utter relief. Just an extreme weight, heavy weight was taken off my shoulders. And that was kind of the upside of the whole thing at the time. So I just wish you peace and rest and love in your life and peaceful nights. And things will eventually come together. And if you can possibly do it, avoid getting on any drugs because they create dependency or addiction. And look into the natural alternatives. And simply, the fact is, the more sleep you get, I'll tell you, the more rested you're going to get, the more able you will be. People literally forget how to fall asleep or whatever. So just realize it's the foundation of your mental stability, and do your best to get enough, and don't feel bad if you seem to need a little bit more than other people. Well, I thought I was done, but I just saw Kim and Mikey's video, and I have to tell you, you have got to see it. It is the newer one, and it's about the Kingdom Halls, and it shows a clip of a Watchtower video, which is, I agree, the worst one I have ever seen. And it's New Hall, set to the music of New York, New York, and you just have to see it to believe it. And what did they say in there? Well, they make the whole case for me, because they talk about the ones who never sleep, honoring them, extolling them for going out, getting that work done on the new halls, all the permits and all the work they do. And they don't even sleep, which is a great and good thing. So they were very good witnesses who don't sleep and knock themselves out. So I hope you will look it up. I have to add one more experience, which I forgot to put in when I was in my late mid-teens. I was babysitting for making a little money, to buy clothes, etc. And so I was up 2 or 4 in the morning on a regular basis on the weekends, and yet I would still go out at least one morning. And this particular time, I just was so exhausted, I just could not force myself out. And so over comes this brother who is about 3 or 4 years older than me, and he actually walked into the house, found me in the bedroom, and pulled me out of bed, told me I had to get up and go out in the service, no matter how tired I was. So I just want to make this case. I think it's a very valid one, and I haven't seen it covered under any of the other YouTubes.